Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, I want to talk about Jani Hakanpaa and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Because there's been a lot of confusion around the signing of this player. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of confused as well. So let's run through the timeline of the Toronto Maple Leafs signing Jani Hakanpaa. Because Elliotte Friedman tweeted out at 3:55 p.m. July 1st that the Maple Leafs had signed Hakanpaa to a 2-year deal worth $1.5 million, and Darren Dreger also tweeted out something very similar. Those are the two more reputable insiders in all of hockey reporting that, so I'm not going to doubt them. But when you come over to mapleleafs.com and you just look at the players that they have listed on the team website's roster under defensemen, they have Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They have Dakota Mermis, who was the depth signing from the other day. They also have Chris Tanev. They have Cade Weber, but no Jani Hakanpaa. Why is that? When Darren Dreger and Elliotte Friedman sent out those tweets on July the 1st, there was no reason to be suspicious of anything, right? It wasn't a mystery or a secret that this player had missed the end of last year, including the playoffs for Dallas, with some type of knee injury. But the last update that I can find on him anyway is what Jim Nill provided on Stars Locker Cleanout Day, and this article from Daily Faceoff says that Hakanpaa, 32, had an arthroscopic procedure on his knee that kept him from returning during the playoffs, but apparently does not need anything else done to him. He had been dealing with a knee injury since March, but his timeline to return had constantly been up in the air, especially when he had been labeled as day-to-day throughout most of the playoffs. But then later that night on July the 1st, Steve Simmons puts out an article and says that according to his sources, that Hakanpaa's knee injury may actually be career ending. And to quote the article directly, it's said to be bone on bone with not much knee left. It's said to be trouble. So for the last couple of days, it's sort of just been up in the air since then, and we haven't really gotten any confirmation on what's actually going on with this player. Because like we showed in an earlier clip, he's still not listed on mapleleafs.com as being actually on the roster. But Nick Kypreos came out in, I believe, an article from yesterday or from this morning and said a Dallas source confirmed to me they would have liked to have re-signed Hakanpaa, but feared he has a degenerative knee that would be tough to manage next season. The Leafs certainly do not feel the same way, as their medical team had an extensive look prior to the signing and were very comfortable giving Shanahan and Trey Living the green light to move forward. And this is from an article in the Hockey News from September of 2023, so from before this season had even started. Earlier this week, General Manager Jim Nill confirmed that defenseman Jani Hakanpaa elected to forego offseason knee surgery to repair an injury that he apparently suffered during Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals against the Golden Knights. Back in June, Nill indicated that Hakanpaa would undergo a procedure to remedy the issue, but after multiple consultations with medical personnel, the 31-year-old Finnish blue liner changed his plans. I find it extremely frustrating that it's July the 4th and all of these rumors are swirling around, and the Maple Leafs just haven't come out and told us what is going on with this player. You know, I understand I have a journalism degree. I work in sports media. My job is to do the research, obviously, that we've done in this video, but it would be nice to not have to speculate and guess. Because supposedly the timeline is that this player hurt his knee in 2023, opted to not have the surgery that he clearly needed because he re-aggravated the same knee and injury the following year this past March, missed the entirety of the playoffs with it. The Stars think that it's a degenerative problem and that possibly he could never play hockey again. The Maple Leafs doctors don't agree, and somehow we're having this conversation through Steve Simmons, Nick Kypreos, and the entirety of Twitter. Usually, I would just let it go and wait for the team to make an official statement on the matter and clear up any and all confusion that way. But this also wouldn't be the first time that Brad Treliving, as the general manager of the Maple Leafs, mind you, so in just over a year of having the job, would have signed a player that already had some type of career-ending injury. You know, John Klingberg played like a dozen games or so for the Leafs. He got on a plane to Sweden and then never came back. If that was an injury that was on again, off again, on again, off again, or the player wasn't just willing to cooperate and go on LTIR quietly, it would have been an absolute disaster for the Leafs last season to just have $4 million tied up in what was a question mark. And Hakanpaa has the potential to be the same, although it's for $1.5 million and not for $4 million bucks. And it seems like there is an understanding here already that the player may not play again. And if that's the case, you chuck him on LTIR for 2 years, I guess, and it is what it is. But at the same time, even if the Maple Leafs are able to place this player on LTIR, it doesn't absolve the situation of any sort of consequences, right? LTIR is not a magic tool that just gets rid of all of your problems. There are a lot of benefits to not using it. You know, Jake Muzzin and Matt Murray's previous deals had finally come off the books, and it looked like the Maple Leafs, for the first time in a very long time, were not going to have to use LTIR to start the season. Because if they would have come into this season with even $250,000 worth of cap space or upwards of $500,000 worth of cap space, it doesn't sound like a lot. But if you're able to bank that space throughout the year, by the time the trade deadline rolls around, you could add a player making upwards of $6 million, especially when you factor in the ability to get salary retention. But if you have Hakanpaa on LTIR and he's not able to recover from this injury, barring the Leafs having another significant injury where the player is placed on LTIR and then comes back miraculously for game one of the playoffs, they're going to be very limited in what they can do at the trade deadline for the next 2 years because of the gamble that Brad Treliving is taking, again, on a good player like we'll see in a minute, but it's a gamble. If Hakanpaa never ends up playing hockey again, obviously that's unfortunate. But if this is the Maple Leafs using their medical staff and betting on them to be able to get this player back up to speed and healthy again, they could have gotten themselves a really good player for a very reasonable rate. You know, when guys like Brendan Dillon and Joel Edmondson and Ilya Lyubushkin are signing for $4, $3.8, and $3.2 million per year, as we'll see in a couple of minutes when we look over the numbers for Jani Hakanpaa, a $1.5 million cap hit for this player has the potential to be a big time steal. But like we said earlier, if the Maple Leafs medical staff is able to come through here, this is a very good player that I'm very excited about. He's 6'6" and 225 pounds every time he steps on the ice, and he shoots right-handed. Usually when you describe how big a guy is every time he steps on the ice, it's because you're trying to justify your favorite team playing an absolute pylon. But that is not the case when it comes to Jani Hakanpaa, who played the 4th highest percentage of his time on ice up against the other team's best players on Dallas's blue line last year. But if you contextualize the numbers a little bit further here, there were only 3 other defenders in the entire NHL out of over 200 to play at least 500 minutes at 5-on-5 to start a lower percentage of their shifts in the offensive zone than Jani Hakanpaa. This guy was playing a ridiculous amount of D-zone faceoffs and not getting any opportunities to play in the offensive zone. And rightfully so. This guy's terrible at handling the puck. But if you let him do his thing in the defensive zone, you're going to be quite happy with it. Because while playing all of those difficult minutes and while playing a top 4 role on the Dallas Stars, he was able to break even in terms of the expected goals for. If we're looking at the with and without numbers for Jani Hakanpaa and the Dallas Stars defense over on hockeyviz.com, we'll actually see that the Dallas Stars were a slightly better defensive team without Hakanpaa on the ice. But again, you have to factor in that Hakanpaa was playing a lot of defensive zone minutes, and he was playing in their top 4. So when he's not on the ice, it's also because the other team's best players are not on the ice as much. So the assignments are going to be a little bit easier. But also, I want to direct your attention to the front of the net here, because when Hakanpaa is on the ice, compared to when he's not, there still isn't a whole lot going on here, but when he is there, there's even less. And that's the part of the ice that you're paying him to protect, and there aren't very many defensemen in the NHL who are better at protecting their own net than Jani Hakanpaa is. And you would think that the Dallas Stars having the 8th ranked penalty kill in the league last year would have had a lot to do with Jake Ottinger, but during the regular season, Ottinger only had a .905 save percentage. So Hakanpaa, having played the second most shorthanded time on ice per game, last year with the Stars, the Leafs. If he is healthy again, it's a big asterisk. They're also getting a guy who could play a lot of minutes on their penalty kill, which was an issue for them. They had the worst penalty kill out of any team to make the playoffs last season. So after going over all of the numbers, I can see why the Maple Leafs wanted to take a gamble on this player, right? If you're able to acquire a guy who is right-handed, can play in your top four, can play heavy defensive zone minutes and be effective while doing it, while also being 6'6" and 225 pounds and blocking a lot of shots and throwing a lot of hits. Yeah, I'll take that for $1.5 million, especially when guys like Brendan Dillon and Joel Edmondson and Ilya Lyubushkin were all signing for between $3 and $4 million per season. But like we highlighted here, if he's not healthy, this is a really big gamble that could really tie the Maple Leafs' hands up in quite the knot when it comes to the trade deadline over the next couple of seasons. The one thing I will say about the Maple Leafs medical staff is that they have access to all of the doctors and all of the technology, right? There's a scene from the Amazon All or Nothing series from a couple of years ago where Wayne Simmons is rehabbing a broken finger. And he's got this really weird thing on his arm. And they asked him what it was. And it's a bone regrowth stimulator machine, you know? These guys have access to things that you and I and the public have just never heard of. So if there is a team that can get him healthy and back into the lineup, it's probably the Maple Leafs. And if this is the Maple Leafs flexing their financial might outside of what they're allowed to spend on the salary cap, then all the power to them, right? If they're able to get this player healthy and back up to speed, he's going to be worth a lot more than just $1.5 million. But just like what we saw with Klingberg, it could be an absolute disaster, you know? So that's going to be it for this one. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more because more will be on the way. There's still lots to talk about when it comes to the Maple Leafs and their offseason and what they could do next. But I really hope they just release a statement and clear all this up. Because as of now, I mean, I don't speak Finnish, but Hakanpaa in Finnish must mean mystery. Because we've definitely got one on our hands.